If you're over 60 and you felt any of these 8 symptoms in the morning, your next 24 hours could determine everything. Picture this moment. You open your eyes after what seemed like a restful night, but something feels wrong. Perhaps there's an unusual pressure building in your head, or your chest feels strangely tight as you try to sit up. These aren't just random discomforts, they could be your body's urgent plea for attention. The truth that most people don't realize is this: the most critical warning signs of life-threatening health conditions often reveal themselves within those first precious minutes after you wake. They arrive softly, almost imperceptibly, like whispers in the dark, and they frequently disappear before you can even process what happened. But dismissing these signals could mean overlooking a vital message your body is desperately trying to deliver. Today, we're going to explore 8 specific morning symptoms that may be alerting you to something severe, potentially even an impending stroke. These warning signs are the ones that most people quickly rationalize away, convince themselves aren't important, or simply attribute to the natural process of aging. Yet they can actually indicate that something far more serious is developing beneath the surface. This conversation isn't designed to frighten you. It's meant to empower you, because recognizing even a single one of these warning signs could literally save your life or the life of someone you love. If you're wondering whether your morning experiences have been trying to communicate something important, stay with me through this entire discussion. Here's what I want you to do right now. If you've ever experienced something unusual when waking up, type a 1 in the comments below. If your mornings consistently feel normal without any concerns, type a 0. And please don't forget to subscribe to Senior Forge 365 for more potentially life-saving health information delivered in a way that's easy to understand. Now let's dive into the very first warning sign, one that countless people fail to recognize as being connected to stroke risk. Waking up to a sudden, severe headache can genuinely feel like your brain is being attacked from the inside. This isn't the familiar dull throbbing you might experience occasionally, nor is it the type that gradually fades after you've had your morning coffee. This particular headache strikes with intensity and force. Many people describe the sensation as though a hammer is repeatedly striking one specific area of their skull. For older adults, particularly those who have celebrated their 60th birthday, this type of powerful headache occurring during the early morning hours could represent far more than simply a rough start to your day. It might be your body raising a critical red flag that demands immediate attention. Medical researchers have discovered that significant changes in blood pressure levels and blood flow patterns during the delicate transition from deep sleep to wakefulness can trigger this specific type of pain, especially when there's a dangerous blockage or blood clot beginning to form somewhere in the brain. A comprehensive study published in the prestigious medical journal Neurology revealed something alarming. A substantial number of individuals who ultimately suffered strokes reported experiencing a severe, unexplained headache as their very first symptom, often appearing hours or even days before any other recognizable warning signs emerged. Try to imagine this scenario. You're anticipating a peaceful, quiet morning to start your day, but instead you find yourself gripping your head tightly because of an intense, throbbing pain that seems to come from nowhere. Minutes pass, but the pain doesn't subside. Resting doesn't help. Drinking water doesn't provide relief. This particular type of headache, especially when it appears suddenly and without any clear trigger or explanation, should absolutely never be ignored or dismissed as unimportant. If this situation ever happens to you or to someone you care deeply about, here's exactly what you should do first. Sit up slowly and carefully. Remain as calm as possible, and pay extremely close attention to any other unusual symptoms that might be appearing. Are you experiencing blurred vision or difficulty seeing clearly? Does one side of your body feel weaker than the other, or is there numbness you can't explain? Don't try to diagnose yourself or convince yourself it's nothing. Call for emergency medical assistance immediately, even if you notice the headache beginning to fade, because that fading sensation doesn't mean the danger has passed. It's always better to err on the side of caution than to live with regret about waiting too long. Now, while we're discussing various forms of morning discomfort, let's examine another critical signal your body might be sending: a heavy, constricting sensation in your chest immediately after waking. You open your eyes feeling ready to start the day, stretch your arms out gently, and then suddenly you become aware of it: a distinct pressure centered right in the middle of your chest. It's not exactly painful in the traditional sense, but it feels undeniably heavy, as though someone has carefully placed a sandbag directly on your ribcage. Many people characterize this sensation as a squeezing feeling or an uncomfortable weight that makes drawing a full, deep breath genuinely difficult. For a large number of older adults, this morning chest tightness is frequently dismissed as simply having slept in an awkward position or perhaps experiencing indigestion from last night's dinner. However, the actual truth could be dramatically more serious and life-threatening. That uncomfortable heaviness you're experiencing could be a clear indication that your heart or brain isn't receiving an adequate supply of oxygen-rich blood. When you're lying horizontally in bed, your body's overall circulation naturally slows down. Then, when you first begin to get up and move, your heart must work considerably harder to pump blood efficiently throughout your entire system. If there's already a narrowed artery somewhere in your body or a dangerous clot that's forming, this transition period from rest to activity can cause these warning symptoms to suddenly manifest. Medical research has confirmed that early morning hours represent a peak time for serious cardiovascular events such as heart attacks and strokes, precisely because of this sudden increased demand placed on the circulatory system. Here's a real-life example that illustrates this danger. One gentleman in his mid-70s shared his story about how he had been waking up with this heavy chest sensation for several weeks. He repeatedly convinced himself it was simply acid reflux acting up. Then, one particular morning, the heaviness was accompanied by sudden shortness of breath that alarmed him. That's the moment when his concerned daughter immediately rushed him to the hospital emergency room. The medical team's diagnosis was sobering. He was actively experiencing a mild stroke. So what should you do if any part of this description sounds familiar to your own experiences? First, and most importantly, don't lie back down and simply hope the sensation will pass on its own. Instead, sit up slowly and deliberately, breathe as deeply as you can manage, and carefully take note of any additional symptoms like dizziness, unexplained sweating, or waves of nausea. If the heaviness persists for more than just a few minutes or feels unusual in any way that concerns you, it's absolutely time to seek immediate medical attention. Trust your instincts. They exist for a reason. And if your breathing also feels compromised, as though you're struggling to get sufficient air into your lungs, that's yet another warning sign you absolutely shouldn't ignore. Let's explore that particular symptom next. You sit upright from your bed expecting to begin your day normally, but suddenly it feels exactly like you've just rapidly climbed several flights of stairs without stopping. Your chest is rising and falling rapidly. Your breathing feels unnaturally shallow and inadequate, and there's this unsettling sensation of not being able to draw in enough air no matter how hard you try. It might even feel like you're gasping for breath despite the fact that you haven't been moving or exerting yourself at all. For older adults, this type of unexplained shortness of breath occurring immediately after waking up can serve as a major red flag that something serious is happening. Breathing difficulties in the morning aren't always related to lung problems or respiratory conditions. Sometimes the root cause is actually your brain. During sleep, your breathing is controlled automatically by a crucial part of your brain called the brainstem. If there's any disruption in that specific region of the brain, such as a small blood clot beginning to form, it might not produce noticeable symptoms until you physically shift positions or attempt to sit up. According to important research published in the medical journal Stroke, sudden unexplained breathlessness can be one of the very earliest indicators of what's called a posterior circulation stroke, which specifically affects the back portion of the brain where vital automatic functions are controlled and regulated. Let's consider this scenario. You're sitting on the edge of your bed, actively trying to catch your breath. There's no cough present, no cold symptoms, no logical reason for this difficulty. The breathlessness continues for longer than a full minute. That's not normal, and it's definitely not something you should rationalize away or ignore. A woman in her early 60s shared her frightening experience of feeling like her chest simply wouldn't fully open up. One morning, she decided to wait it out and see if it resolved on its own, and tragically, she suffered a minor stroke just 2 days later. Looking back with the clarity that hindsight provides, that initial breathlessness was her body's very first desperate cry for help. If this ever happens to you, immediately stop whatever you're doing. Sit upright in a comfortable position, stay as calm as possible, and observe whether your breathing gradually returns to normal within a few minutes. If it doesn't normalize, or if the breathing difficulty is accompanied by dizziness or chest discomfort, call for emergency help without delay. Time is absolutely critical in these situations. And while we're discussing various signals from the body, consider this. What if your hearing suddenly fades significantly, or you notice a strange, persistent ringing in your ears? That could represent the next early warning sign you need to know about. You're sitting up in bed, perhaps beginning to head toward the bathroom, when suddenly one ear feels distinctly muffled, as though someone has carefully plugged it with cotton. Or even worse, there's this high-pitched ringing sound that simply won't go away no matter what you try. It's not causing physical pain, but it's deeply unsettling and concerning. For older adults, a sudden loss of hearing in one ear or persistent ringing, what medical doctors refer to as tinnitus, could represent far more than just a simple ear problem. It could be your brain actively trying to get your attention about a serious issue. The delicate inner ear relies completely on a constant, steady flow of blood to function properly and maintain your hearing. If a blood clot or blockage interrupts that crucial flow, even briefly for just a few moments, it can cause significant hearing changes. A revealing study published in the medical journal Stroke found something alarming. People who experienced sudden hearing loss were at a significantly higher risk of having a stroke within the next few months, especially when the hearing loss affected only one side and appeared without any warning or obvious cause. Think about it in these terms. Your ear is functioning perfectly fine when you go to sleep at night, but come morning, sounds seem unnaturally distant, or there's a strange buzzing sensation that definitely wasn't present before. You might attempt to pop your ears, thinking perhaps it's sinus pressure causing the problem, but nothing changes or improves. One man in his late 60s described his experience of waking up to a dull, unsettling silence in his right ear. He initially assumed it was simply earwax buildup. Just 1 week later, he suffered a mild stroke. So, what can you do to protect yourself? Don't ignore sudden changes in your hearing, particularly if they appear without any clear explanation. Try to remember exactly when it started, whether it's affecting one ear or both ears, and if it's accompanied by dizziness or noticeable balance issues. Then get it checked by a medical professional as soon as possible. Time matters tremendously in these situations. And speaking of things that show up unexpectedly without warning, what happens when you wake up and suddenly discover you can't control your bladder? Let's explore that particular symptom next. It's early morning. You swing your legs off the side of the bed, stand up with the intention of walking to the bathroom, and before you can even make it halfway there, you realize with shock that it's too late. It catches you completely off guard and unprepared. Maybe it's just a small amount, maybe it's more substantial than that. And if this has never happened to you before in your adult life, it can feel simultaneously confusing and deeply embarrassing. But sudden, unexpected urine leakage first thing in the morning may represent far more than just a simple bladder issue. The brain plays an absolutely major role in controlling bladder function and timing. If blood flow to the specific parts of the brain that regulate that control becomes disrupted, such as during a minor stroke event, it can result in a complete loss of control, even without any other noticeable symptoms appearing. Research from the respected Journal of Neurology notes that early morning urinary incontinence, especially when it appears suddenly and isn't tied to any known bladder problems or infections, can serve as a red flag for neurological events like strokes. One woman in her early 70s shared her story about how she suddenly started having accidents in the morning despite never having experienced bladder issues before in her entire life. At first, she convinced herself it was simply part of the natural aging process. But when it happened 3 days in a row, she wisely decided to see her doctor for evaluation. Medical tests revealed something shocking. She had experienced a small silent stroke overnight while she was sleeping. So if this happens to you even a single time, take it seriously and don't dismiss it. Try to remember when it first started, how frequently it's happening, and whether it's paired with other unusual symptoms like weakness, confusion, or dizziness. Write everything down in detail and speak with your healthcare provider about your concerns. Now imagine this. You wake up, and for no clear reason whatsoever, everything just feels off and wrong. Maybe you feel unusually irritated by the smallest, most insignificant things. Maybe you're suddenly quiet, withdrawn from others, or even on the verge of tears, and there's no real cause you can identify or point to. If this sounds familiar to your experience, you're not alone in feeling this way. Mood swings in the morning aren't just emotional or psychological. They can actually be neurological in origin. And for older adults, a sudden unexplained shift in mood upon waking could be a subtle but significant sign that something concerning is happening in the brain. When the brain experiences interrupted blood flow, such as with a small stroke or what's called a TIA, transient ischemic attack, it can directly affect emotional regulation and stability. The brain's frontal and limbic regions, which are specifically responsible for mood and behavior, are especially sensitive to these changes in blood flow. A study from the Journal of Stroke and Cerebrovascular Diseases found something noteworthy. Sudden emotional instability, irritability, unexplained sadness, or emotional flatness was reported in many patients during the very early stages of stroke, even before more obvious physical symptoms made an appearance. Let's imagine this specific scenario. Your morning used to start predictably with a smile on your face and a warm cup of coffee in your hands. But now you wake up feeling cold, not physically cold, but emotionally distant and detached from everything around you. You snap irritably at your partner for asking a simple, innocent question. Or you sit quietly in a chair, staring out the window, completely unable to explain the emotional heaviness sitting in your chest. It might pass within a few hours, or it might linger throughout the entire day. If this shift in mood is new, noticeably different from your normal personality, and happens more than once, it's absolutely worth paying attention to. Don't dismiss it as just having a bad day or being in a bad mood. Write down what you felt, how long it lasted, and whether anything specific triggered it. Share this detailed information with your doctor. It might be the only clue your body is giving you about a serious problem. Now, what if your memory starts playing tricks on you immediately after waking up? That's our next sign to watch carefully. That's definitely a sign worth noticing and taking seriously. You get out of bed, begin your familiar morning routine, and suddenly forget completely why you walked into the kitchen. You ask your spouse the same question twice without even realizing you already asked it. Maybe you struggle to remember what day of the week it is, even though you checked the calendar just moments ago. Occasional forgetfulness can certainly happen to anyone, regardless of age. But if these moments feel noticeably more frequent or more intense, specifically right after waking, they might represent more than just sleepy confusion or morning grogginess. Short-term memory issues occurring in the morning could point to something concerning happening in your brain while you sleep. During the night, your brain actively processes and stores information from the day. But if blood flow is reduced during that crucial time, especially due to a minor stroke or TIA, it can significantly interfere with how memories are properly formed or accurately recalled. A study from the Archives of Neurology found that sudden memory lapses, particularly short-term ones that appear without warning, were a common early symptom in certain types of strokes, especially those affecting the hippocampus and frontal lobes of the brain. Imagine waking up and being completely blank about what you had planned for that day, even though you carefully made a detailed list the night before, or asking your daughter if she called you, only to have her remind you that you just spoke on the phone barely 5 minutes ago. It's genuinely disorienting, and for many people, it's deeply scary. One man described his experience like this with perfect clarity. It felt like someone had briefly unplugged part of my brain from its power source. I was aware and conscious, but utterly confused about basic things. His doctor later confirmed through medical testing that he'd had a mild stroke in his sleep. If something like this happens to you, don't simply chalk it up to normal aging or getting older. Keep a notebook right by your bed. If you notice repeated lapses, patterns emerging, or if a loved one points it out to you, take it seriously and act. Bring it up with your doctor and specifically ask if further evaluation is needed. Next, let's talk about something that might seem relatively minor but can turn serious extremely fast. What if during breakfast you suddenly struggle to swallow your coffee or start choking on water? That's definitely a sign worth noticing. It's early in the morning. You're sipping your morning coffee or taking the first few bites of your breakfast. And then, without any warning whatsoever, it feels like the liquid goes down the wrong way. You cough, maybe even choke a little, or maybe it's food that feels like it's getting stuck even though you're chewing carefully and thoroughly. This kind of sudden difficulty swallowing, or what doctors call dysphagia, can be more than just a one-time fluke, especially in older adults who are over 60. This can be an early neurological warning that something serious is developing. Swallowing is actually a remarkably complex process controlled by several different parts of the brain working in coordination. If even a small area suffers from reduced blood flow, such as during a minor or silent stroke, it can disrupt this delicate coordination. According to a study in the Journal of Clinical Neuroscience, unexpected morning-onset dysphagia was directly linked to strokes in the brainstem, where many of the crucial nerves responsible for swallowing originate. Imagine this scenario. You've had absolutely no issues eating or drinking for years. Then one morning you take a simple sip of water and suddenly you're coughing uncontrollably, or a bite of toast feels like it's moving too slowly down your throat, almost as if your throat isn't working quite right. It can feel scary and genuinely strange. One woman in her late 60s described it as feeling like my throat forgot what it was supposed to do. She ignored it, convincing herself it was just dry throat from sleeping with her mouth open until it happened again, and she ended up in the emergency room. Doctors later confirmed she had experienced a TIA that very morning. So, what can you do to protect yourself? First, slow down significantly. Don't force yourself to eat or drink. If swallowing feels off or unusual, take very small sips, chew carefully and thoroughly, and stay upright. If it keeps happening repeatedly, or even if it happens just once and feels genuinely abnormal, contact your doctor immediately. It could be nothing serious, but it could also be your body's way of waving a critical red flag. We've talked about headaches, chest pressure, memory issues, even swallowing difficulties. But what do all these seemingly different signs have in common? Let's bring everything together in the final message. Mornings should be gentle and peaceful. A stretch, a warm drink, a quiet moment to start the day with gratitude. But if your body is whispering something different through pain, confusion, pressure, or silence, it's absolutely worth listening to. These signs may be small, fleeting, and easy to ignore or rationalize away. But when they show up again and again, they might be your early warning system trying to save your life. Your body rarely shouts at first. It begins with whispers. Maybe you've brushed off that headache or told yourself the chest heaviness was just a bad dream. Maybe you've blamed the forgetfulness on age or the choking on dry toast from breakfast. But now you know better. These signs matter tremendously. They deserve your attention, your care, and your action. And here's the good news. Awareness gives you power. Knowing what to watch for means you can act faster and potentially save your own life. Talk to your doctor, track your symptoms carefully, and don't be afraid to ask questions, even if you think it's probably nothing. Because when it comes to your health, nothing can be the start of everything. If this video helped you feel more prepared and empowered, drop a 1 in the comments. If you're still not sure but want to learn more, drop a 0. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Senior Forge 365 for more life-saving tips explained in a way that makes sense and empowers you. Take care of yourself. And tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes, listen closely. Your body is always speaking, Make sure you're listening.